You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and it is a very sad day today. No, not because Joe Biden has been sworn in as President of the United States. Did I vote for him? No, but look, I hope he does a good job. I really do. I've said that before. I want him to do a good job. He's my president. It is a sad day because Don Sutton passed away on Monday. His death was announced yesterday from some form of cancer. We don't know which. At the age of 75. It's hard to believe that a pitcher with over 300 wins and over 3,000 strikeouts, one of the few to reach both of those almost impossible marks, could be underrated. Yet Sutton is underrated. When you think of the best pitchers in baseball history, you think of guys like Cy Young, Walter Johnson, Christy Mathewson, Nolan Ryan, Sandy Koufax. It would take you a really long time to get to Don Sutton. But it shouldn't. If you wanted to put him in your top 10, I'd listen to you. Top 15, probably. Top 20, definitely. Now, part of that was because he was overshadowed by some other players. Guys like Koufax, Don Drysdale, Tommy John, the great Dodgers infield of the late 70s to the early 80s. Even the other pitchers of his era. Guys like Steve Carlton, Nolan Ryan, Catfish Hunter, Phil Niekro, Tom Seaver, etc., etc. They got a lot of the headlines. Sutton just went out there every day, did his job, and really didn't care about the headlines. I didn't know this, so thank you, Wikipedia. Sutton's Major League debut was at the age of 21. It took place on April 14th, 1966. On that day, Greg Maddux was born. That is an interesting piece of baseball trivia. And Sutton joined a Dodgers rotation that already had Koufax, it already had Drysdale, it had Claude Osteen. They needed a fourth starter. Sutton filled that role perfectly. He went 12-12 with a 2.99 ERA and 209 strikeouts. His 209 strikeouts that year is the most by a National League rookie since Grover Cleveland Alexander got 227 in 1911. Interestingly enough, Sutton's 209 strikeouts was the second most he'd ever get in a season. The most he'd ever get in a season was in 1969, when he got 217. That was when the Dodgers really started going into this new era of Dodgers baseball. No more Koufax. The last year of Drysdale. No more old Brooklyn Dodgers. It really started a new era of Dodgers baseball. Sutton was an integral part of that transition. In 69, he went 17-18 with a 3.47 ERA and 217 strikeouts. He pitched over 290 innings. The year after that, in one of Sutton's worst seasons, he got his first winning record. So it took Sutton 5 years to get an over 500 winning percentage. He went 15-13 with a 4.08 ERA. He led the majors in earned runs. But hey, he got a winning record. If I don't jump around, we're going to be here until Inauguration Day 2024. I mean, I could go on and on about Sutton. Tom Van Riper, a friend of mine, in the interview that I did with him, said that in some stats, Jerry Koosman is equal to Don Sutton. All due respect to Koosman, really good pitcher, had a really good career, not as good as Don Sutton. In 1972, Sutton really staked his claim to being one of the best pitchers in baseball. He made his first All-Star team, went 19-9 with a 2.08 ERA, and pitched 9 complete game shutouts. That led the majors. The year after, he made his second All-Star team, went 18-10 with a 2.42 ERA. The year after that, Walter Alston's last playoff year as Dodgers manager, Sutton made his first starts in the playoffs. He started games 1 and 4 of the NLCS against the Pirates. Sutton was nothing short of excellent in those 2 starts. In fact, excellent may be an understatement. In Game 1, he pitched a complete game shutout, only gave up 4 hits, and in Game 4, the clinching game, Sutton didn't need to be great because the Dodgers scored 12 runs, but he was anyway. Pitched 8 innings of 1-run ball. The Dodgers would go on to meet the Athletics in the World Series that year. Obviously, the Athletics were looking to complete their three-peat. Sutton, in his 2 World Series starts that year, was pretty good. In Game 2, he pitched 8 innings of 2-run ball, tied the series at 1. Unfortunately for him, Game 5, he didn't have his best stuff. He had thrown 137 pitches on October 13th. He starts Game 5 on the 17th. The Dodgers need to win this game to stay alive. Sutton wasn't bad, he just wasn't great. He pitched 5 innings of 2-run ball. You know what? For someone who had thrown 137 pitches just 4 days prior, I can live with that. Sutton's not the reason that the Dodgers lost that World Series. The year after, Sutton made his 3rd All-Star team. He went 16-13 with a 2.87 ERA. The year after that, Sutton won 20 games for the only time in his career. He went 21-10 with a 3.06 ERA. Somehow, someway, he wasn't an all-star. You gotta wonder what games those guys were watching. The year after that was Tommy Lasorda's first time in the playoffs as Dodgers manager. Sutton made his last All-Star team that year, but it was in the playoffs that he really shined. In Game 2 of the NLCS, against the Phillies, he pitched a complete game, only gave up 1 run. In Game 1 of the World Series against the Yankees, he pitched 7 innings of 3-run ball. And in Game 5, he pitched a complete game where he gave up 4 runs. Obviously, though, the Yankees would win the World Series that year, partially because Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs in the decisive Game 6. I could go more in depth on that, but I'm not going to. The year after was almost a carbon copy of what happened in 77. Sutton had a similar regular season record, didn't make the All-Star team, but he was good. 15-11 with a 3.55 ERA. In 77, he went 14-8 with a 3.18 ERA. Pretty similar. In the playoffs, though, Sutton struggled. In Game 3 of the NLCS against the Phillies, Sutton didn't even make it 6 innings, gave up 7 runs, 4 of them earned. In his 2 World Series starts against the Yankees, he gave up 5 runs in both starts. The Yankees came back from 2-0 down to win 4 straight. The last out of that World Series was a foul pop-up caught by Thurman Munson behind home plate in Dodger Stadium. After that, Sutton's Dodgers career kinda tailed off. He was still good. In 1980, he went 13-5 with a major league leading 2.2 ERA. But he was 35 years old. The Dodgers wanted to integrate this 20-year-old phenom named Fernando Valenzuela into the rotation. So they let Sutton leave in free agency. Valenzuela enters the Dodgers rotation in 81, and Fernando Mania begins. So Don Sutton spanned two very important eras in Dodgers history. The end of the Koufax era to the beginning of the Fernando era. Sutton went to the Astros in free agency and pitched well. There's this notion about Don Sutton that after he left the Dodgers, he just fell off a cliff. He was a hanger-on, really didn't contribute. He was a compiler, all that stuff. The simple fact is that's just not true. After Sutton left the Dodgers for the first time, he came back to the Dodgers in 88. But after he left the Dodgers to go to the Astros, Sutton went 94 and 81 with a 3.71 ERA. His average win-loss record was 12 and 10. Per 162 games, it was 14 and 12. His average strikeouts was 115 per 162 games, 131. Was he as dominant as he was in the mid-70s? No. But he was still really, really good. He was still a valuable contributor for teams like the Astros, the Brewers, the Athletics, and the Angels. Before I go too far down that rabbit hole, and I will get into it, I'll tell you what he did with the Astros. Obviously, that was the strike-shortened season. In the first half, the Astros did nothing. In the second half, they really came on. And Sutton was a big part of their great second half. He went 7-1. He helped lead the Astros to the NLDS. Unfortunately, he didn't pitch in it because in one of the last games of the season, he had a patellar fracture. In 1982, Sutton was traded to the Brewers in a very controversial trade. If you read the Wikipedia article, you'll see Ray Knight speak out against it. It wasn't just Knight. A lot of people didn't like this trade. Sutton was sent to the Brewers for Kevin Bass, Frank DiPino, and Mike Madden. Kevin Bass was a really good player. DiPino was a solid reliever. Madden was really nothing. So was the trade as bad as it could have been? No, but you still would have liked to have kept Sutton around. Imagine Sutton on the 86 Astros with Mike Scott, Bob Nepper, and Nolan Ryan. Maybe they would have incorporated Jim Deshaies also. But the simple fact is, if Sutton was on the 86 Astros, maybe the NLCS ends differently. Maybe games 5 and 6 don't go into extras. Maybe the Mets lose those games. We'll never know. It's an interesting hypothetical. But regardless, in 82, Sutton did go to the Brewers. In Game 3 of the ALCS against the Angels, he pitched 7 2/3 innings of 3-run ball. In the World Series that year, against the Whitey Ball Cardinals, Sutton didn't do much. Sutton spent 2 full seasons with the Brewers. Then he was traded to the Athletics. Only pitched 29 games for him. Went to the Angels. And in the playoffs that year, in the ALCS against the Red Sox, Sutton dug deep. He started Game 4 and pitched 6 1/3 innings of 1-run ball. The Angels went up 3-1. Unfortunately, the Red Sox came storming back. Sutton tried to put out the fire that John Candelaria had lit, but it was too little too late. Sutton did end his career with the Dodgers, like I said, in 88. He went 3-6 with a 3.92 ERA, but he wouldn't get to pitch in the playoffs because he was released in August. Sutton couldn't go too deep into games. The Dodgers wanted someone who wouldn't tax the bullpen as much, so Sutton was cut. Regardless of that ignominious end, you'd think Sutton would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of only 10 guys in the history of baseball to have over 300 wins and 3,000 strikeouts. In fact, when Sutton was on the Hall of Fame ballot, there were less guys in that club. Realize, Roger Clemens and Randy Johnson got 300 wins in the 21st century. Sutton was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1998. He was the only person that the baseball writers put in. Look, they got it right. He was alive to see it. But you've got to put him in sooner. Don Sutton should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. The reason he wasn't was because people think of him as a compiler. He wasn't. When my dad and I were talking about him, my dad said he was just a little bit of a compiler, Jacob. Is that what you just said? Yeah. He was. Look, to me, the compiler is a guy who hangs around just for the sake of hanging around. He doesn't have much to offer. He just wants to keep playing. Guys like Jason Giambi and Bartolo Colon are compilers. The reason why I don't think of Sutton as a compiler is because at the end of his career, he was still effective. 88, the last year of his career, under 4 ERA. I'll take it. Okay, he couldn't go deep into games. Just because he didn't have a lot of stamina at the end of his career means he's not a Hall of Famer? In 1986, at the age of 41, Sutton went 15-11 with a 3.74 ERA. There's no question that he was effective that year. If he had retired that year, he would have had 310 wins and 3,431 strikeouts. Hall of Famer. Easy. But because those last couple of years he wasn't as dominant, people kept him off their ballot. It's ridiculous. Sutton wasn't a compiler. Wasn't as dominant, but could still get the job done. He was an excellent broadcaster. Did a great job with the Dodgers, great job with the Braves, great job with the Nationals. He currently has the most wins and strikeouts in Dodgers history. Is it possible that Clayton Kershaw can beat him? The answer is yes. Kershaw will probably get strikeouts in, if not this coming year, then the year after. Wins, it's possible. Kershaw's at 175. Sutton's at 233. He's got to get 60 wins. Kershaw's going to turn 33 before opening day. Is it possible he could eclipse Sutton? Yes, but that's going to be a tough ask. But you know what? If it takes someone as dominant as Clayton Kershaw, a future Hall of Famer, to break your records, you know you did something right. May Don Sutton rest in peace, alongside his former manager in Lasorda. Hopefully this is the last former Dodger that I have to eulogize. Moving on now to the Blue Jays, making a couple moves that I told them not to make. Why don't people listen to me? People should listen to me more often. They signed George Springer to a 6-year deal worth $150 million, that's $25 million a year, and they signed Kirby Yates to a 1-year deal worth $5.5 million. They also signed Michael Brantley to a 3-year deal. We don't know for how much at the time of this recording, but obviously I'm still going to talk about it. I can't begrudge the Blue Jays for getting 3 of the best free agents in baseball. George Springer was either the best, second best, or third best free agent in all of baseball, depending on who you talk to. Michael Brantley is one of the most underrated players in all of baseball. And Kirby Yates, in 2019, was probably the best reliever in baseball. He was an all-star. He had a 1.19 ERA. He had 41 saves. That led the majors. The guy got Cy Young votes. I understand that Yates didn't do much last year, but 60 games, okay? He's a bounce-back candidate. There's no question about that. Here's the thing, though. I just said this yesterday. Again, no one listens to me. The Blue Jays didn't need hitting as much as they needed pitching. The Blue Jays were in on all the top guys. They got 3 of the best free agents in baseball, give them credit. The stuff about people not wanting to go to Toronto, you can't say that anymore. But the reality is, the Blue Jays just didn't need these guys. They needed Yates, okay? Yates makes perfect sense for him. The Blue Jays really didn't have a closer last year. Anthony Bass did it. Rafael Dolis did it. Even guys like Jordan Romano and A.J. Cole were called upon to save games. The Blue Jays needed a closer. There's no question. Yates can be that closer. To get him for 1 year at $5.5 million, that is fantastic. Great job by the Blue Jays. But why are you going after outfielders? You have Lourdes Gurriel, Randall Grichuk, and Teoscar Hernandez. All three of those guys are really talented players. They all hit over 270 last year. They all had double-digit home runs. They all had over 30 RBIs. And their DH is Rowdy Tellez. Very underrated player. Hit 283 last year. You want to tell me you don't believe in those guys? Gurriel and Tellez, you should believe in. They have real talent. Grichuk, you'd like a little more average, but the guy will still give you 25 home runs. I'll take that. Same thing with a guy like Hernandez. I don't get it. I don't understand why the Blue Jays were going after outfielders so much. The only thing I can think of is that they've got a trade in the works. They've got a trade in the works involving Rowdy Tellez and either Grichuk or Hernandez. Because Brantley's not going to be a full-time outfielder for him. He's going to be their DH. And as much as I like Tellez, there's really no spot for him on the Jays except DH. You've got Vlad Guerrero Jr. playing first base. The guy can't play third. He's got to play first. You're not moving him. So with Brantley in the fold, there's no room for Tellez. And Springer is either going to be their center fielder or their right fielder. That means no Grichuk or no Hernandez. Take your pick as to who you'd rather have. Grichuk and Hernandez are very interchangeable to me. Now, I'll give the Blue Jays the benefit of the doubt that they have a trade lined up. They cannot go into next season with a stacked lineup, but no starting pitching, outside of Hyunjin Ryu and Taijuan Walker. I understand that you don't need a complete team now. It's January 20th. But, as of this very moment, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to go after Springer and Brantley with Tellez, Grichuk, and Hernandez still on the team. I mean, I'll say this. If they can work out a trade with those guys and some prospects for Luis Castillo, job well done by the Blue Jays. And again, it's okay to give them the benefit of the doubt that they have a trade in the works. Maybe not for Castillo, but for another starter. Preferably two. But as of this very moment, I can't get behind bringing these guys in. And I have no issue with the contract. I saw some people get upset at the contract. He's not worth $25 million a year. He's not worth $150 million. Yes, he is. Last year, he had .265 with 14 homers and 32 RBIs. Really, really good leadoff hitter. Doesn't have the speed that you'd love in a leadoff hitter, but he gets on base. I'll take it. The year before that, he had .292 with 39 home runs and 96 RBIs and had made his third straight All-Star team. He won World Series MVP in 2017. He is a great playoff performer. This contract makes him the third highest paid outfielder in terms of AAV in all of baseball, behind just Mike Trout and Bryce Harper. And in terms of total value, he's at 6 for all outfielders, behind Trout, Mookie Betts, Harper, Christian Yelich, and Jason Hayward. Yes, he is worth that contract. The only issue I have is that at this very moment, there's no obvious fit, and the Blue Jays had much bigger holes to fill. But again, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they have a trade in the works. There's one more thing to break down with Springer signing to the Blue Jays. That is that he's not going to go to the Mets. I'll say this. It doesn't bother me. I'm not saying that as a Mets hater. I really didn't think they needed Springer. Their outfield from left to right is Dom Smith, Brandon Nimmo, and Michael Conforto. They're fine. Their outfield is fine. You want to tell me that you don't think Dom Smith is a left fielder? You and Sandy Alderson agree on that. But, you know what? I'll take subpar defense if Dom Smith can hit 300. If he can hit 25 home runs. Also, last year, in over 160 innings in left field, he didn't make an error. No one's going to be mistaking him for Al Kaline out there, but I think he can hold his own in the outfield. If he really works on it, if he has a full spring training, and if in the winter he was practicing, I don't know if he was, I don't know if he wasn't, I think Smith can hold his own. I really never understood the desire by some Mets fans to add an outfielder. I'd be surprised if the Mets made any more splashy moves. They may beef up the bullpen a little bit more. Brad Hand has been linked to them heavily. But other than reinforcing the bullpen, I think they're done. And I'd be okay with that as a Mets fan. Moving on now to the Angels, signing Jose Quintana to a 1-year deal worth $8 million. And this move makes sense for the Angels. I've always liked Quintana. I'm pretty sure I've told this story before, but I once proposed a trade for the Yankees to get him. The White Sox could get one of Judge and Frazier and one of Torres and Jorge Mateo. This was before we knew that Judge and Torres would become Judge and Torres. This was in the 2016 offseason, after Quintana had made the All-Star team. Now, if the White Sox had chosen Frazier and Mateo, that's fine. No one would be upset at that. But Judge and Mateo, Frazier and Torres, or Judge and Torres, that would be one of the worst trades in Yankees history. Even though the last couple years Quintana has struggled, in 2019 he had a 4.68 ERA, and last year he only pitched in 4 games, there's still talent there. In 2018, he went 13-11 with a 4.03 ERA. The Angels did need to add another lefty. They have good righties. Dylan Bundy, Griffin Canning, Jaime Barria. But I'm not the biggest Andrew Heaney fan in the world. Patrick Sandoval hasn't set the world on fire. They needed a stable lefty. Quintana will give them that. I do expect him to bounce back. He certainly has the talent for it. I think Perry Manassian has done a really good job in his first offseason as Angels manager. He made the trade for Iglesias, both Jose and Rysel. He signed Alex Claudio. He signed Kurt Suzuki. Now he signed Quintana? That's a good first offseason. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Valk talk. And I have to start with Phillip Rivers retiring. This had been speculated on for a while, but it is official. I can't begrudge the decision if Rivers feels he has nothing left to accomplish. Then who am I to tell him he shouldn't retire? Could he have still contributed in the NFL? The answer is yes. Rivers was set to be a free agent in a couple months. There are a lot of teams that would sign up for a quarterback who had a 68 completion percentage, who threw for over 4,100 yards, 24 touchdowns, and only 11 interceptions. Is he the player he once was? No. But we weren't in a Drew Brees situation where he just couldn't get the job done. Rivers was capable of getting the job done. And he almost beat the Bills a couple weeks ago in the playoffs. Give him some credit. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Colts do at quarterback now. They do have a couple talented quarterbacks on the roster. Jacoby Brissett has shown that if he's called upon to start, he can hold his own. Maybe he's not the most exciting quarterback ever, but he's not bad. And they have a guy in Jacob Eason who I had a second-round grade on last year. Now that he's had a year to learn from Rivers and Frank Reich, I'll be very interested to see what he does in the NFL. Are the Colts gonna add another quarterback? Probably. I've seen Deshaun Watson linked to him. That's not going to happen. There's no way that the Texans trade him within the division. Not to Indy, not to Jacksonville, and not like they need a quarterback, but not to Tennessee. If he's going to go anywhere, it's going to be to the Jets. They can offer the Texans the best package. I've seen Carson Wentz linked to him because of the Frank Reich connection. That would be a perfect landing spot for Wentz. But I don't know if the Colts would want to do it. I wouldn't be opposed to them rolling with Brissett and Eason next year. Let Brissett start opening day. Like I said, he has talent. He's not great, but he's not awful. And you know what? If he lays an egg, you've got a quarterback in Jacob Eason who I'm really high on. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But you know what? I think that could work out. I think the Colts are fine at quarterback. If I was Chris Ballard, I don't think I'd make a splashy move to add another quarterback. Also, we're now finally able to officially debate Rivers' Hall of Fame candidacy. I mean, I've said this before. I do think Rivers is a Hall of Famer. You can't leave someone out of the Hall of Fame who's made 8 Pro Bowls, is in the top 10 in all major categories for a quarterback. Passes completed, pass attempts, passing yards, and passing touchdowns out of the Hall of Fame. Are there more deserving Hall of Famers than Phillip Rivers? The answer is yes. I think Eli Manning has a better argument to make the Hall of Fame than Phillip Rivers. Drew Brees has a much better argument to make the Hall of Fame than Phillip Rivers. Larry Fitzgerald has a much better argument to make the Hall of Fame than Phillip Rivers. The lack of playoff success hurts him. This guy never made a Super Bowl. Forget not winning it. He never even made it. This guy only made one AFC Conference Championship game. In 2007, he got destroyed by the Patriots. That was their 18th win that year. And Rivers was dreadful in that game. Completed just over 50% of his passes, threw 2 interceptions. The Chargers only scored 12 points, and that was on 4 Nate Kading field goals. Yes, the lack of playoff success is a turnoff. Yes, he's not the most deserving Hall of Famer there is. But he is still a Hall of Famer. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Make Rivers wait, but don't leave him out forever. Moving on now to the Rams, focusing on hiring Raheem Morris as their next defensive coordinator. That's according to Mike Garofalo and Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. And I gotta say, I like this move. Morris did a solid job with the Falcons after taking over for Dan Quinn. The Falcons went 4-7. They were 4-2 under him at one point. In fact, there was some buzz that he could get the job permanently. But then the Falcons went on a big 5-game losing streak. They lost 4 really close games because, of course, they did. They're the Falcons. But you know what? Morris should still be commended for what he did with the Falcons. He had him playing tough in every game. The defense looked much better under him. And this is a guy who probably isn't gonna be hired away by another team. Everyone loves to hire Sean McVay guys. Matt LaFleur, Zach Taylor, Brandon Staley. Any McVay connection you have helps you in your quest to become an NFL head coach. I don't see a team hiring Morris as their head coach. In his career, he's 21-38 as a head coach. I understand he's still young. He's 44. And it's possible that a team gives him another chance if the Rams' defense balls out like they did this past year. I mean, it doesn't take much skill to coach guys like Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. But I do think Morris will be with the Rams for a while. That stability will help the Rams. You can't afford to churn through coordinators over and over. That's just not going to work. I love this fit. I like this hire. Morris is a really smart guy. Good job by Sean McVay. The last story to talk about is the Jaguars removing the interim tag from Trent Baalke. He will be their full-time GM. And in a weird way, this makes sense. There's no question that Baalke was terrible in San Francisco. Ran Jim Harbaugh out of town, did a terrible job with Jim Tomsula, a terrible job with Chip Kelly. Yeah, Baalke shouldn't be calling the shots. But he's not going to be calling the shots in Jacksonville. Urban Meyer is. And here's a guy who's been in the NFL since 1998. He actually got his start as a scout for the Jets. So the Jaguars are keeping around a guy with over 20 years of NFL experience to help a guy who has no NFL experience. It makes sense. You don't let Baalke have a lot of say. But you know what? He can give you advice. He can teach you the inner workings of the NFL if you're Meyer. And Meyer wouldn't have taken this job if he didn't have total control. Baalke's just around for advice more than anything. And as bad as Valk was in San Francisco, you still need a veteran NFL guy to help you out if you're Meyer. I also like the fact that Valk was with the Jaguars this past year, so he knows the team inside and out. That's also going to really help Meyer. I'm not sure what this means for the first overall pick. I do think that there is a package that the Jets could offer to convince the Jaguars to move down one spot. The Jets take Lawrence, the Jaguars take Fields. But there's no question that that's unlikely. It was always unlikely. I think the more likely thing is Deshaun Watson becoming a Jet. I really do. But going back to Valk, this move makes sense. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that the Tigers are getting close to opening day. I don't know if that's good or bad, though.